The dust rolled endlessly across the Afghan desert, painting everything in shades of beige and fatigue. Trucks rumbled along the makeshift road, kicking up plumes that clung to the air like ghosts unwilling to leave. Inside one of those trucks sat Specialist Emily Carter, 23 years old, fresh out of Fort Sam Houston, her uniform still too new, her boots still too clean. She held her medic bag tightly on her lap, as if it contained the last piece of certainty she had left in the world. Forward Operating Base Dagger was her destination, a small, isolated outpost in the middle of nowhere, closer to enemy territory than to any real help. Soldiers at her previous station had whispered about it with a mix of dread and pity. The Forgotten Base, they called it. A sunburned graveyard for good men. Emily wasn't sure what she had expected when she volunteered to serve overseas. Maybe courage would come easier once she was here. Maybe the sand and the sound of helicopters would make her feel like part of something larger, something meaningful. But as the convoy rolled to a stop, and she stepped into the heat that felt like it was melting her skin, she wasn't sure anymore. Captain Harris greeted her with the weary look of a man who had seen too many young faces come and go. Specialist Carter, welcome to Dagger. You're our new medic, he said, extending a gloved hand. His handshake was firm, but his eyes told another story, one of exhaustion and quiet resignation. Yes, sir, she replied, standing straight. He led her through the base, introducing her to the handful of soldiers stationed there. There was Private Lewis, barely 20 and always smiling. Sergeant Delgado, whose humor was as dry as the desert air. And Corporal Vega, a radio operator who slept with his headphones on, listening for signals that rarely came. The base was small, just a few barracks, a mess tent, a half-collapsed watchtower, and a communications post that looked like it had been pieced together from spare parts. The heat was unrelenting, the wind constant. It wasn't the kind of place that made heroes. It was the kind that swallowed them whole. That night, after unpacking her gear and writing her name on a metal cot, Emily sat alone outside the infirmary tent. The desert stretched endlessly before her, flat, silent, and indifferent. In the distance, she could hear faint gunfire, the pop of rifles echoing like someone snapping branches. She stared at the horizon and thought of home, of her mother's kitchen, of cool rain, of mornings that didn't smell like diesel and sand. She pulled out her journal, something she carried from her early days of training, and began to write. Mom, everything's fine here. The guys are friendly, and the sunsets are beautiful. You'd love it. Don't worry about me, I'm safe. It was a lie, but it was the kind she could live with for now. Over the next few days, she settled into routine. Medical checks, ration distributions, cleaning wounds from training drills. She learned that out here, even boredom was dangerous, too much of it, and your mind started to drift toward fear. Lewis would often bring her stories to break the monotony. You know, when I signed up, I thought I'd be in New York guarding something important. Not sitting in the middle of the desert waiting for ghosts, he said one evening, tossing pebbles at a rusted barrel. Emily chuckled. You wanted adventure, Private. Here it is, sun, sand, and unlimited dust. He grinned. I'll trade it for air conditioning and a real coffee any day. That night, the power flickered in the mess hall. The generator sputtered and died, plunging the base into darkness. For a moment, all that could be heard was the wind. Then a voice, one of the sentries on the watchtower, called out, Movement! Southeast Ridge. The lights flickered back on. Everyone froze. Captain Harris rushed out, squinting into the dark, binoculars raised. After a few tense seconds, he exhaled and shook his head. Just a dust storm, he said. Nothing to worry about. But Emily noticed the unease in his tone. Even the most seasoned soldiers had started glancing over their shoulders more often lately. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the wind batter the tents, a constant, low moan that felt almost human. She got up, wrapped herself in her jacket, and stepped outside. The sky was a deep velvet, scattered with stars brighter than she had ever seen back home. It would have been beautiful, if not for the sense of something watching. She walked toward the edge of the camp, where the wire fence marked the boundary. Beyond it, the desert stretched in endless silence. Then she heard it, a faint echo. Not the wind, not the hum of the generator. A sound that chilled her blood. A single gunshot. She froze, waited, then another. Farther away. 2 more. Then silence. The sentry on the tower shouted down again. Probably hunters. Locals! His voice carried nervous laughter. But Emily wasn't convinced. The next morning, she treated a local child, brought in by a translator. The boy's arm was cut open, deep and jagged. Accident, the translator explained quickly, avoiding her gaze. Emily nodded, cleaned the wound, and bandaged it gently. The boy didn't flinch. He just stared at her with large, dark eyes full of something she couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Or warning. When she handed him a piece of chocolate before he left, he hesitated, then whispered something to the translator. The man frowned slightly, then turned to Emily. He says, "Don't stay here. The wind carries death." Emily blinked. What? But before she could ask more, they were gone, swallowed by the swirling dust. That night, she wrote in her journal again, though her words came slower this time. Something's off here. The men joke about it, but I can feel it. Like the air itself is waiting for something. I don't know what. She looked up as the lights dimmed again. The generator coughed once more before dying completely. The base fell silent, save for the whispering wind. From somewhere beyond the walls, a dog howled a long, mournful sound that echoed into the night. Captain Harris's voice came faintly from outside, barking orders to fix the power. But even he couldn't command away the feeling that had begun to settle over the camp, a feeling of being watched. Emily stood by her tent, eyes scanning the darkness. Somewhere far beyond the dunes, faint lights flickered like campfires. Too many to be random. Too steady to be natural. Her pulse quickened. She thought of the child's words. The wind carries death. For the first time since arriving at Forward Operating Base Dagger, Emily Carter realized the war wasn't something far away. It was closing in on them. And she was right at its heart. The mornings at Forward Operating Base Dagger were eerily calm, too calm, like the world held its breath before exhaling trouble. The sun rose over the jagged ridges in a dull blaze of orange, baking the sand into glassy heat before breakfast was even served. Emily Carter woke with the taste of grit on her tongue, brushing dust off her uniform for what felt like the 100th time. The hum of the generator had become their lifeline, proof the base still had power, that someone still controlled something in this barren nowhere. But lately, even that hum seemed less reliable. It sputtered every now and then, a reminder that even machines were growing tired out here. Emily zipped up her medic bag, stepping outside her tent. The soldiers were gathered for morning briefing, their faces shaded under helmets, expressions half dulled by exhaustion. Captain Harris stood near the command post, pointing at a crude map laid across a folding table. Insurgent activity reported 40 clicks south, he said, his voice steady but weary. Intel says they're moving supplies, nothing close to us. Private Lewis, standing near the back, muttered under his breath, "Yeah, because they'll just announce when they're coming." Emily elbowed him gently, suppressing a smile. But the laughter died quickly. Everyone felt it, the unease threading through every word, every movement. After the meeting, Emily helped Corporal Vega check the medical inventory. "We're low on morphine again," he said. And no fresh bandages since last supply drop. When's the next one? She asked. Should have been 2 days ago. Their eyes met. No one said it aloud, but both knew something was wrong. Supply convoys didn't just miss bases, not unless the roads were too dangerous to travel. That evening, the wind began to pick up, rolling over the base like an invisible tide. The horizon blurred into shades of gold and red, and the air shimmered as if the desert itself was on fire. Lewis sat next to Emily on an ammo crate, his rifle resting on his knees. You ever get the feeling you're in the wrong place? He asked suddenly. Emily looked at him. All the time. He chuckled softly. Nah, I mean, like fate got your name wrong. I was supposed to be an electrician back home, not sitting in the middle of nowhere waiting for shadows. She smiled faintly. And yet, here we are. Lewis looked away, his grin fading. You know, I heard something last night. Out by the wire. Thought it was an animal. Then I heard voices. Couldn't tell what they were saying. Emily frowned. Did you report it? He nodded. Harris said it was probably locals passing through. Her gaze drifted toward the desert. Locals didn't wander this far at night. Not unless they had a reason. The following morning brought a strange discovery. One of the night patrols failed to return on time. When the search team went out, they found the vehicle half buried in sand, the radio destroyed, and the tires slashed clean through. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just silence. Captain Harris ordered everyone on alert, but insisted there was no need to panic. Could be the sandstorm, he said. Could have covered the tracks. But the storm had been weak, and everyone knew it. Emily spent that afternoon patching up a soldier's cut hand while listening to the base chatter over the radio. Static. Every few minutes, a faint signal flickered through, then nothing. That night, she couldn't shake the sense of dread crawling beneath her skin. She sat outside the infirmary, the wind humming low across the sandbags, the stars flickering dimly above. Lewis joined her again, holding a thermos of coffee. Can't sleep? She shook her head. I don't think anyone can. He handed her the cup. You know what the worst part is? He said. It's not the waiting. It's not knowing. Like we're standing on a minefield that hasn't gone off yet. Before Emily could respond, a loud metallic clank echoed from the fence line. Both of them froze. Lewis stood instantly, gripping his rifle. You heard that? Yes, she whispered. They scanned the perimeter. Nothing but shifting shadows. A second sound followed, faint, deliberate footsteps. Someone was out there. Lewis moved toward the tower, signaling the guard. Check southeast, he called. The guard swept the spotlight across the dunes. The beam sliced through dust and wind, catching something. A flicker of movement, then nothing. Could be an animal, the guard said nervously. Or someone testing the fence, Lewis muttered. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Captain Harris arrived moments later, half-dressed, radio in hand. Report. Movement by the perimeter, Lewis said. Possible recon. Harris scanned the dark, jaw clenched. Double the watch. Nobody goes out tonight. He turned to Emily. Doc, get some rest. If this is something, you'll need to be sharp. But Emily didn't sleep. The following day was quiet, too quiet. No jokes in the mess hall, no music from Viga's radio. Even the flies seemed to have gone somewhere else. Emily spent the morning reorganizing her supplies, counting bandages and antiseptics she prayed she wouldn't have to use. Then, around noon, the air shifted. The wind stopped. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. From somewhere distant came a low, rolling sound like thunder. But there were no clouds. Sergeant Delgado looked up from his post, squinting at the horizon. That's not weather. Through binoculars, Emily saw it, a faint dust trail in the far distance, moving slowly but steadily toward them. Too straight to be natural. Convoy? Vega asked. Harris shook his head. No transponder. No response on radio. Keep eyes up. Hours crawled by. The trail vanished behind the dunes. Nothing else moved. By evening, nerves were stretched thin. Harris ordered patrols to stay within the perimeter. No one goes past the wire until daylight, he said. I want eyes everywhere. That night, Emily wrote another letter she would never send. Lewis says he saw something beyond the dunes today. I want to believe it's nothing. But the silence feels wrong. Even the birds are gone. If something happens, I hope I'll have the courage to do what I need to. As she closed her notebook, she noticed the wind had changed direction. It now came from the south, carrying with it a faint smell of smoke. Not the campfire kind. The acrid, metallic scent of burning fuel. Her pulse quickened. She stepped outside, scanning the dark horizon. Nothing but the whispering dunes. Lewis appeared beside her, face pale under the dim lights. Smell that? She nodded. Fuel. He looked toward the command tent. We should tell Harris. Before they could move, the radio crackled suddenly to life in the distance. Vega's voice, laced with panic. Captain, you need to see this now. Emily and Lewis sprinted to the comms tent. Vega pointed to the radar screen. Tiny blips, dozens of them, were moving toward the base. They're not responding to hails, Vega said. Could be interference, but before he could finish, the screen went black. The generator groaned once and died. The lights across the base flickered, then went out entirely. In the darkness, Emily could hear the sound, faint at first, then unmistakable, engines. Dozens of them, grinding through sand. Captain Harris's voice cut through the silence. Positions. Everyone, move. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She grabbed her bag and ran for the infirmary. Outside, the first tracer fire lit up the sky, streaks of red and gold slicing through the night. Lewis shouted something behind her, but his words were lost in the thunder that followed. Mortar. The ground shook beneath her boots as the first shell hit the eastern wall. Emily stumbled, clutching the nearest sandbag wall for balance. The horizon erupted in fire. The attack had begun, and the night, the one she had feared all along, had finally come for them. The first explosion shattered the night, like thunder tearing open the sky. Emily Carter's world flipped into chaos before she even had time to think. The ground heaved beneath her boots, hurling sand and debris through the air. The scream of the siren followed, shrill and broken, echoing across the base as men poured out of their tents half-dressed, grabbing weapons, shouting orders, running toward light that wasn't morning. It was fire. Emily ducked as another shell exploded near the vehicle yard. A ball of flame engulfed two Humvees, their metal carcasses twisting in the heat. She sprinted toward the infirmary, clutching her medic bag, lungs burning from the smoke. The air stank of fuel, sweat, and terror. Get to cover. Someone yelled behind her. But she didn't. She couldn't. Her training had drilled one thing into her head. When everyone runs away from the wounded, a medic runs toward them. A body lay on the sand near the mess tent, motionless, face down. She dropped to her knees beside him. The Namatag Red Dawson. Shrapnel had torn through his shoulder, blood pulsing between her fingers as she pressed down. Stay with me, soldier. You're okay, she said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. He groaned, eyes fluttering. There? They're inside the fence, he gasped. Her heart lurched. The perimeter was breached. A deafening blast followed, throwing Emily backward as the communications tower exploded in a shower of sparks. For a moment, the night turned pure white, and then she heard nothing but ringing, sharp, piercing, endless. When her vision cleared, the sky was burning. She staggered to her feet, disoriented, scanning through smoke and shadow. Figures darted everywhere, soldiers firing, shouting, falling. Captain Harris was near the command post, barking orders into a half-working radio. "Vega, get a signal to HQ now. We need air support." Vega was already slumped over the console, his headphones askew, blood trailing down his cheek. The radio hissed uselessly. Emily stumbled toward them, ducking behind a sandbag wall as bullets tore through the air above her. "Captain, he's gone," she shouted. Harris's jaw tightened. "Damn it. Grab your gear, specialist. We need to regroup." Before she could respond, a burst of gunfire sprayed the command tent. Harris dropped instantly, a hole through his chest. His radio clattered beside him. "Captain!" Emily screamed, crawling to him. But he was gone, eyes open, glassy, staring through the smoke. Her hands trembled. She pressed them over his wound anyway, whispering, "No, no, come on, sir." But the blood wouldn't stop. Lewis appeared from the shadows, covered in soot and dust. "Emily, we have to move." She looked up at him, dazed. "Harris is down." Lewis's face hardened. "Then we're on our own." He pulled her up, and together they ran toward the medical tent, bullets whistling past. Around them, the base was unrecognizable, flames licking the walls, the watchtower collapsing in on itself, ammo cooking off with thunderous cracks. Every explosion painted the night in flashes of orange and blue, the colors of hell. Inside the medical tent, chaos reigned. Wounded men lay on stretchers, groaning, shouting for help. Blood pooled beneath cots. The air was thick with smoke and screams. Emily snapped into motion, instincts overriding fear. Tourniquet. Pressure bandage. She barked. A young private, hands shaking, handed her gauze. She pressed it against a soldier's thigh, wrapping tightly as he cried out. "You'll live," she said, even though she wasn't sure anyone would. Outside, the firefight raged. Every time a round struck the sandbags, dust rained down from the ceiling. The tent felt like it could collapse any second. Lewis stumbled in, clutching his side, blood seeping through his uniform. Emily's breath caught. "You're hit." "It's nothing," he grunted, wincing. "Just a graze." She tore open his sleeve anyway, cleaning and wrapping the wound in seconds. "You shouldn't be here." He smirked weakly. "Where else would I be? You think I'm leaving you alone in this mess?" Another explosion cut them off. The blast wave threw them both to the ground. Supplies scattered. The tent flaps ripped open, revealing a sky streaked with tracers and fire. "Ammo depot." Lewis coughed. "It's hit." Emily's heart sank. The depot was full of munitions. If it went up completely, the whole base would follow. "Help me." A voice screamed nearby. They turned. A soldier was pinned beneath a metal beam, his leg crushed. Emily crawled through the debris, ignoring the flames licking closer. She tried to lift the beam, but it wouldn't budge. Lewis joined her, gritting his teeth, and together they heaved it just enough for the man to crawl free. As she pulled him away, the depot exploded. The night became day again. A roaring wave of heat slammed through the camp, throwing sandbags, crates, and people like rag dolls. The shockwave hit Emily hard, knocking her into Lewis. For a second, everything went silent again, like someone had cut the sound out of the world. When the ringing faded, she opened her eyes to find herself half buried under debris. Her arms throbbed, her face stung from flying grit. She pushed herself up, coughing. The air was thick, choking. "Lewis!" She shouted, No answer. Louis. She crawled through the wreckage, her heart hammering. Then she saw him, pinned beneath a collapsed metal pole, blood trickling from his forehead. "Hang on," she cried, trying to move it. It didn't budge. She found a loose pipe and used it as a lever, straining with everything she had. With a groan of metal, it shifted enough for her to drag him out. He was breathing, but barely. She tore open her medic bag, working on autopilot, checking his pulse, bandaging his chest wound, stabilizing his leg. When he finally opened his eyes, she almost cried with relief. "Still here," he rasped, forcing a smile. "Don't talk," she said, voice trembling. "Save your strength." He nodded weakly. Outside, the base continued to burn. The screams had quieted too much. She realized most of the noise had died because there were fewer people left to make it. Emily staggered outside again, staring at what remained of forward-operating base dagger. The horizon was ablaze, the desert reflecting the fire like molten glass. Vehicles smoldered in blackened heaps. The command post was gone, the radio tower reduced to twisted steel. The perimeter fence lay shredded, gaping open to the dark beyond. Through the flames, she saw shadows moving, figures darting between smoke and ruin. Not soldiers, insurgents. They were inside. She ducked back behind a sandbag wall, breathing hard. She grabbed a discarded rifle, hands shaking. She wasn't trained for this, not really. But she knew how to survive, and how to protect those who couldn't. She peered through the smoke. One insurgent moved toward the infirmary tent. She raised the rifle. Her hands steadied. She exhaled. One shot. The man dropped. Her ears rang again, but this time not from explosions, from the shock of what she'd just done. She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to think. Louis's faint voice echoed behind her. We have to get out." "I can't," she whispered. "There are still people here." "Then you'll die here," he said, coughing weakly. Emily looked toward the sky. Flames danced in the rising smoke, turning everything a sickly red. Somewhere far off, she thought she heard chopper blades, or maybe it was just the wind. The night was endless, the heat unbearable, and the silence between explosions was somehow worse than the blasts themselves. She gripped her medic bag tighter. "I'm not leaving them," she whispered to no one, to everyone, to the ghosts already walking through the smoke. And as another explosion ripped through the camp, Emily Carter, the young medic from nowhere, braced herself against the fire, the chaos and the impossible weight of survival. Because the night wasn't done burning yet. The night had lost all meaning. Smoke choked the stars, fire painted the horizon, and the wind carried only the sounds of agony and gunfire. Emily Carter crouched behind the ruins of the sandbag wall, the rifle heavy in her trembling hands. Every muscle screamed for rest, but rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. The once bustling forward-operating base dagger was now a graveyard, flickering with dying flames, scattered helmets, and echoes of orders that would never be followed again. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing shallowly through her bandana. Her thoughts flickered like the firelight. Louis, the wounded, the insurgents. What now? Somewhere behind her, Louis groaned. Emily crawled back toward the half-collapsed medical tent, where he lay propped against a crate. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. She'd done what she could, stabilized him, patched the bleeding, but he needed real care. Care that wasn't coming. "How bad?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. He gave a crooked grin. "Feels like I got run over by a tank. Twice." She smiled weakly. The joke was thin, but it was something human in a world gone mad. "I can't feel my leg," he added quietly. Emily's throat tightened. "That's the morphine." You'll be fine." They both knew it was a lie, but it was the only thing keeping them from breaking. Outside, a burst of gunfire crackled in the distance. The sound was closer now, moving inward, sweeping the base. The insurgents were finishing what the explosions had started. Emily crept to the torn tent flap and peeked through. 3 figures moved across the yard, rifles slung, their voices low but sharp. They were checking for survivors. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure they'd hear it. She ducked back, whispering urgently to Lewis, "We have to move, now." He shook his head. "You can't drag me. You'll slow down and we'll both die. I'm not leaving you." He grabbed her wrist, eyes fierce despite the pain. "Listen to me, Carter. You're a medic, not a soldier. You can't save everyone. You've got to live." But she wouldn't abandon him. Not after everything. She scanned the tent. Most of the wounded were beyond saving. But near the back, under a half-collapsed stretcher, she saw Private Jenkins, barely 20, bleeding from a leg wound, whispering a prayer. Emily's resolve hardened. If I can still hear them breathing, I'm not leaving them behind. She crawled to Jenkins, whispering, "We're getting out." He blinked up at her, dazed. "Is it over?" "Not yet," she said, sliding her arm under his shoulders. She dragged him toward the back opening of the tent, where the sandbags had split open. It was slow, painful work, every inch punctuated by the distant sound of footsteps, crunching closer through the rubble. She reached for Lewis. "Come on, I'll help you too." He shook his head again, voice barely a whisper. "You need to go. Take him and find cover." "If they find me, stop," she snapped, eyes burning. "You're coming with me." For a second, they just stared at each other, both stubborn, both terrified. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but if I slow you down, you don't hesitate." "I won't," she lied. They slipped out through the torn fabric and crawled through the debris toward the burnt-out vehicle yard. The moon was gone, buried behind black clouds. Every shadow could be an enemy. Every noise felt like a gun being cocked. Emily's hands shook from exhaustion. Her palms were blistered, her knuckles raw. The smell of smoke clung to her hair, her uniform, her skin. Behind them, the insurgents' flashlights swept across the ruins. One beam came dangerously close. Emily froze, holding her breath. The light paused, then moved on. When they reached the far end of the yard, she saw it, the old storm drain that ran beneath the eastern fence. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. "Over there," she whispered. Lewis tried to stand, but collapsed instantly. Emily hooked his arm around her shoulder, pulling with everything she had. Jenkins limped beside her, barely staying upright. A shout split the night. The flashlight beams swung toward them. "Go!" Emily screamed. Bullets tore through the dirt at their feet. She shoved Jenkins toward the drain. "Get in!" He scrambled inside, crawling through the narrow pipe. Emily turned back, dragging Lewis behind her. He gritted his teeth, trying to help, but his leg buckled. A round struck the sand near her boot, spraying grit into her eyes. She fired blindly into the darkness, the recoil slamming her shoulder. A figure fell, or maybe ducked. She didn't wait to see. She pushed Lewis into the pipe and followed, crawling into the darkness, just as more bullets clanged against the metal. The world shrank to the sound of her breathing, ragged, shallow, desperate. The tunnel stank of rust and smoke, the walls slick with condensation. "Keep moving," she gasped. "Don't stop." For what felt like hours, they crawled through the narrow pipe. Finally, a faint orange glow appeared ahead. Moonlight filtered through the grated exit. She kicked it loose and pulled herself out into the cold desert air. Freedom, or what was left of it. The world beyond the base was silent. The dunes stretched endlessly, glowing faintly under the smoke-filled sky. Behind them, the base still burned, a flickering beacon of destruction. Emily collapsed onto the sand, chest heaving. Her entire body ached. Lewis coughed beside her, blood on his lips. "We made it." She nodded weakly. "For now." Jenkins looked back at the fire, eyes wide. "What about the others?" Emily swallowed hard. "There aren't any others." They sat in silence, the weight of it settling like dust. Then a faint rumble in the distance. Not thunder, engines. Emily's head snapped up. Trucks. Lewis tensed. Enemy? She listened, the distinct growl of military Humvees. Multiple. Her heart raced. Could be friendlies, or... She grabbed the flare from her pack, her last one. If it's them, this will bring help. If it's not well, at least we'll know. Lewis caught her wrist. "If you're wrong, I'd rather take the chance than die hiding." She stood, fired the flare into the sky. It burst into brilliant red, lighting up the desert like dawn. For a moment, nothing. Then headlights turned toward them. Jenkins cheered weakly. They saw us. But Emily didn't move. She kept her rifle ready, watching the lights grow closer. When the first Humvee pulled up, the doors opened, and out stepped American soldiers, dusty but alive. "Holy hell," one of them said, rushing forward. "We thought everyone at Dagger was gone." Emily nearly collapsed with relief. "There are wounded inside," she gasped. "The base is overrun, but some might still be alive." The sergeant nodded. "We'll sweep the area." "You did good, Specialist." But she shook her head. "No, I'm going back with you." The sergeant hesitated. "Carter, you've been through hell. You need medevac. I'm not leaving until we get the rest." Her voice was steady, cold, unyielding. Lewis tried to protest, but she silenced him with a look. "You said I had to live. This is how I live." As the convoy rolled back toward the burning base, Emily looked out the window. The sky glowed orange behind them, the air thick with ash. Every shadow hid ghosts, the men she couldn't save, the friends she'd lost, the fire that had taken everything. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She gripped her medic bag tighter, her reflection flickering in the cracked glass. Tonight she had been a soldier, a savior, and a survivor. But as they neared the inferno again, she realized something deeper. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about redemption. And Emily Carter would not stop until every last one of her brothers and sisters was brought home, alive or remembered. The convoy moved in silence, the only sound the rumble of engines and the crackle of distant flames. The desert night had cooled, but inside Emily Carter's chest, a furnace still burned. Every bump of the Humvee jolted her body and her memories. Lewis lay stretched out beside her, his face pale, breathing shallow. Jenkins sat up front, eyes darting toward every flicker on the horizon. The rescue team, 8 soldiers led by Sergeant Mills, scanned the darkness through night vision goggles, weapons ready. They were heading back toward the nightmare Emily had just escaped. "Ma'am," Mills said over the radio static, "you sure you want to do this? You've been through enough." Emily's gaze didn't waver from the distant glow. "There are still people in there." Mills gave a slow nod. "Ben will get them." No one questioned her again. As they crested the final ridge, the full sight of forward operating base Dagger came into view. It no longer looked like a base, just a charred crater of twisted metal and glowing embers. The comms tower had collapsed, tents reduced to blackened skeletons, vehicles smoking like ghosts. Emily gritted her teeth. This was home. These were her people. "All right," Mills ordered. "We sweep sector by sector. Check for hostiles, survivors, anything useful. Stay sharp. This place might still be crawling. Emily grabbed her medic bag and jumped out before anyone could stop her. Her boots sank into soft, ash-laden sand. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of burned fuel and something worse, death. She swallowed hard and moved toward the ruined infirmary. The flap was gone, the inside scorched. Medical crates melted into puddles of black plastic. Her flashlight cut through the haze, catching a glint, a set of dog tags. She bent down, brushing away ash. The name, Vega CPL-D. Her stomach twisted. Vega had been her partner, the one who always cracked jokes about going home to open a taco truck. She clenched the tags in her fist. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Carter." Mills's voice came through the static. "We've got movement near the west perimeter. Could be survivors." She sprinted toward the coordinates, ducking beneath a half-collapsed wall. The ground still radiated heat. Her knees brushed charred cloth, and she forced herself not to look too closely. When she reached Mills's position, 2 soldiers were crouched over a debris pile. "Got someone alive under here?" one shouted. Emily dropped to her knees, helping them dig. Beneath layers of rubble, they found a man, burned, barely conscious, but breathing. It was Sergeant Delgado. His eyes fluttered open, recognition flickering. "Carter." His voice was a rasp. "You?" "Got out." "So are you?" she said firmly, working to free him. "Stay still." He coughed weakly, blood on his lips. "They hit us hard." Came from the south wall. Harris tried to call air support. Comes fried. He didn't make it. Emily froze. Captain Harris. Gone. She forced herself to keep working. "Don't talk. Save your strength." Delgado tried to smile. "You always were stubborn?" And his head lolled to the side. "Delgado, stay with me?" Mills touched her shoulder. "Carter, he's gone." She stared at the lifeless face, her heart cracking all over again. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. But she had to. "Tag him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We'll bring him home." The team pressed on, clearing one section after another. Every corner revealed another story cut short. Half-written letters, burned photos, helmets lying beside rifles still loaded. By dawn, the flames had died down to a smoldering haze. The sun rose weakly through the smoke, turning everything blood-red. Emily stood at the center of the ruins, the silence pressing against her ears. She could almost hear the echoes of laughter from a week ago. Harris yelling orders, Vega tuning his radio, Lewis teasing her about her serious face. Now, only ghosts answered back. Mills approached quietly. "We found 6 survivors so far. 2 critical, 1 stable. We'll evac as soon as the medevac chopper's in range." Emily nodded absently. "Any hostiles?" "Negative." Whoever did this moved out fast. Her mind churned. Why had they left? Why not finish the job? It didn't make sense. Jenkins limped up, leaning on a rifle. "Sarge, I found something by the fence line." He handed over a small dented object, a metal insignia painted black. Emily's blood ran cold. "That's not local," she said quietly. "That's militia grade, paramilitary." Mills frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning this wasn't random. Someone planned this and knew exactly when to hit." Her words hung heavy in the smoke-filled air. They set up a temporary triage point near the remains of the vehicle bay. Emily moved from one soldier to the next, binding wounds, giving morphine, whispering comfort. But her hands were starting to shake. Her mind replayed the night over and over, the explosions, the screams, the way Lewis had begged her to run. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like another attack. When she paused to drink some water, Mills crouched beside her. "You did good, Carter. You saved lives tonight." She shook her head. "Not enough." He sighed. "You can't save everyone." "I know," she said quietly, looking toward the base's blackened heart. "But I should have saved more." By afternoon, the medevac helicopter finally arrived, its blades kicking up waves of ash as it descended. The wounded were loaded aboard, including Lewis, unconscious but stable, now after Emily's field surgery. She stood beside the helicopter, her hair whipping in the rotor wash. Mills shouted over the noise, "You're coming with us." She shook her head. "Not yet." He frowned. "Carter, it's over. We need to get you out." She stared back at the burning ruins. "Not for me, it's not." He hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he gave a short nod. "We'll come back for you in an hour. Don't do anything stupid." She almost smiled. No promises. When the helicopter lifted off, Emily turned back toward the smoldering wreckage. The wind had picked up again, scattering ashes like snowflakes. She wandered through what was left of the command tent, stepping over broken radios and melted maps. That's when she heard it, a faint metallic tap. Her instincts kicked in. She raised her weapon and crouched. "Who's there?" No response. Then another sound, a muffled groan. Emily's pulse raced. She moved toward the sound, pushing aside a pile of debris. Beneath a collapsed section of roof, she saw movement, a hand. She dropped to her knees, shoving pieces of wood and metal aside. Beneath it all was a soldier, badly injured, uniform torn, face streaked with blood and soot. She froze. It was Captain Harris. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. "Captain!" She gasped, pulling at the debris. "Hang on." His eyes opened weakly, focusing on her. "Carter, I thought you got out." "I did. Came back for you." He tried to smile, but grimaced instead. Figures. Never could follow orders. She managed to free him and checked his pulse. Weak, but there. "We're getting you out," she said firmly. Harris shook his head. "No time. They'll be back. They always come back." She froze. "Who?" He coughed, struggling to speak. "Not insurgents. Contractors. Black mark mercs. Someone paid for this." Emily's blood went cold. Paid? By who? He grabbed her wrist, his voice barely a whisper. "Find the hard drive. In Kuhn's tent. Don't let it fall into their hands." Then his eyes rolled back, his breathing slowing. "Captain!" She shouted, shaking him. But he didn't respond. For a long moment, she sat there, the fire crackling faintly around her. Then she forced herself to stand. If Harris was right, if this wasn't just an attack but a cover-up, then the truth was still out there, buried somewhere in the ruins. And Emily Carter wasn't leaving without it. She slung her rifle over her shoulder, grabbed her medic bag, and turned toward the wrecked Kuhn's tent. The battle was over, but the real war, the one that had started all of this, was only just beginning. The air was heavy with smoke and silence. The medevac helicopter had long disappeared over the horizon, leaving Emily Carter alone with the ghosts of forward-operating base Dagger. The flames had died down, but the heat still shimmered in waves across the blackened earth. Every breath she took was filled with ash and memory. The captain's words echoed in her head. "Find the hard drive. Don't let it fall into their hands." Emily adjusted her rifle and walked toward the ruins of the Kuhn's tent. The once bustling command center was now a twisted skeleton of metal and burnt wiring. Radios lay melted, screens shattered, and the floor was scattered with bullet casings and footprints. Boot prints too large, too deep, too deliberate. Not insurgents, mercenaries. She crouched low, studying the prints. They moved with purpose, in straight lines, like men trained to sweep a zone. They'd taken what they came for, or tried to. Emily's flashlight beam danced across the wreckage. Somewhere beneath all this, Harris had hidden something worth killing for. She found the server racks half buried under a fallen beam. Most drives were destroyed, their metal casings warped by heat, but one, near the back, looked intact. She tugged it free, brushing off soot. It was labeled with a single word scrawled in black marker, Daggerlight. Her heart pounded. She had no idea what was on it, but Harris had died to protect it. As she slid the drive into her medic bag, a sound froze her in place. Footsteps. She turned off her light and pressed against the wall, listening. The crunch of boots over sand. Multiple. Slow, deliberate. Emily's hand tightened around her rifle. They came back. Through the haze, she saw 3 figures moving between the tents, their weapons outfitted with silencers. Their gear wasn't standard issue. Darker, heavier, built for stealth. One of them spoke in a low voice, just loud enough to carry through the smoke. Check the command area. Orders said retrieve anything salvageable. No witnesses. Her pulse quickened. Emily crouched behind a wrecked generator, her mind racing. If they found her, she wouldn't stand a chance. But if she stayed, they'd find the hard drive. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a flare, her last one. She waited until the men were closer, their flashlights cutting through the dark like thin blades. Then she threw the flare as far as she could, into a pile of fuel-soaked debris near the east wall. It hit the sand and erupted in a burst of red light. The mercenaries turned instantly, guns raised. Movement. Emily ran. She darted between the ruins, keeping low, heart hammering in her chest. Bullets ripped through the air behind her, hitting walls and twisted metal. The flare's glow flickered in the smoke, confusing their aim. She slid behind the burned-out truck, gasping for breath. Her hand brushed against something cold, a half-full jerrycan of fuel. An idea sparked. She grabbed the can, poured a line of fuel across the sand, and lit it with a spark from her knife. Fire raced across the ground, spreading fast. The flames roared up between her and her pursuers. One of them shouted angrily, a sound muffled by the fire's crackle. Emily used the chaos to move deeper into the ruins. She needed to get out now. She made her way toward the north wall, where the storm drain had led them out before. The metal grate was still open. She dropped her rifle through first, then crawled in after it. The pipe was dark, slick with condensation, but it was safety, or at least distance. Her hands ached as she pulled herself forward, every scrape echoing in the tunnel. Behind her, faint voices filtered through the smoke. She's here somewhere. Find her. She crawled faster. After what felt like forever, she reached the exit. The desert stretched out before her again, endless, silent, lit only by the dying glow of the burning base. She pulled herself free and collapsed onto the sand, coughing. But there was no time to rest. She grabbed her compass, the one Lewis had given her, and checked her bearings. There was an old radio relay station 12 miles north. It had been abandoned months ago, but if the structure was still intact, maybe she could transmit something, or at least hide. She started walking. The night was long, cold, and cruel. The desert stretched endlessly, the stars flickering above like cold witnesses. Emily's boots dragged through the sand, her body numb from exhaustion, her mind running on fumes. She thought of Lewis, unconscious in the medevac, probably still fighting for his life. Of Vega, Harris, Delgado, all gone. And now she was carrying something that men were willing to kill for. Daggerlight, the word haunted her. What could possibly be so important that it would justify wiping out an entire base. By dawn, she saw it, a faint silhouette on the horizon. The radio relay tower. She pushed herself harder, every muscle screaming. When she reached it, she found the place half collapsed, sand filling the rooms. But one console, miraculously, still hummed faintly when she flipped the main breaker. The solar backup still worked. Barely. She plugged the hard drive into a surviving terminal. The old computer sputtered to life, fans whining weakly. A loading screen appeared, and then a folder. Classified. Project Daggerlight. She hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes widened. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't troop movements. It was data on illegal operations, missions carried out under false flags, civilian casualties buried under falsified reports. The files included timestamps, coordinates, even names. And at the top of the authorization list, the same private defense contractor, rumored to be assisting U.S. forces in the region. The same insignia she'd seen on the mercenaries' gear. Her stomach turned. This wasn't an attack. It was an erasure. Someone had discovered the files and ordered the base destroyed to cover the evidence. And she had just uncovered the proof. Before she could react, a sound behind her made her freeze. Footsteps. Emily spun around, rifle raised. A man stood in the doorway, one of the mercenaries. His weapon was already drawn. "Put it down," he said coldly. "You shouldn't have seen that." Emily's mind raced. There was no way she could win in a straight fight. She needed to stall. "Why?" she demanded. "Why kill everyone? They were your own people." He sneered. "Orders. You don't get paid to ask questions. You get paid to clean up." Her hands tightened on the rifle. "You think I'm just going to hand this over?" He smirked. "You're not walking out of here either way." For a second, the world went still. Then both moved at once. His shot went wide. Emily had already thrown herself to the ground, rolling behind the console. She fired back, the round grazing his arm. He cursed and ducked behind a beam. The gunfire echoed through the ruined station, sparks flying from ricochets. Emily's magazine clicked empty. The mercenary advanced, smirking. "End of the line, soldier." She glanced at the console, the upload bar crawling across the screen. 90%. Almost there. She grabbed the flare gun hanging by the wall and fired it straight into a shattered fuel barrel. The explosion threw her backward, heat washing over her. The mercenary screamed as fire engulfed the room. Emily crawled out through the side window, clutching the drive. The tower behind her blazed like a beacon. She didn't look back. By the time the upload finished, the files had already been transmitted to the nearest secure channel, a military oversight node still online from the satellite link. The truth was out. Emily collapsed a few hundred meters away, her hands shaking, lungs burning. She'd done it. She'd survived the base, the desert, the mercenaries. But she knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere out there, the people who ordered Dagger destroyed were still watching, still waiting. And Emily Carter had just become their biggest problem. Emily Carter emerged from the desert ruins as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon. Her boots were caked in ash, her uniform torn and blackened. The adrenaline that had kept her moving through the night had finally faded, leaving her weak but alive. In her hands, the hard drive burned the promise she could not ignore, the evidence of corruption, of lies, of death disguised as orders. The medevac team found her an hour later. A group of uniformed soldiers, faces stern, but familiar enough to trust, or so she thought. They offered her water, food, and a lift out of the desolation she had just survived. Emily's exhaustion almost convinced her to let go, to fall into the temporary safety they promised. But her instinct screamed, Something was wrong. The helicopter lifted her above the smoking remains of forward operating base Dagger. The wind whipped her hair, carrying the smell of charred metal and sand. She glanced down. The base looked like a graveyard, and in a way, it was. One of the medevac pilots, Lieutenant Carter, no relation, noticed her gaze. It's hard to see it from above, isn't it? Feels unreal. Emily nodded, forcing a smile. I thought I'd seen everything down there. Guess the desert has a way of hiding hell until it hits you in the face. The helicopter touched down at a temporary forward operations site. A safe zone far enough to be removed from immediate danger, but close enough to monitor the region. Emily was led to a medical tent, where she was assessed and treated for minor burns and dehydration. Lewis and Jenkins had been stabilized and were resting, thanks to her efforts during the inferno. Emily felt a flicker of relief, fleeting at present. She had saved lives. She had survived. Then she remembered the hard drive. By mid-afternoon, Emily was called to a briefing tent. High-ranking officers sat around a table, their faces serious but strangely calm. A colonel she didn't recognize motioned for her to sit. Specialist Carter, he began, voice smooth and measured. Your actions at Dagger were commendable. You've demonstrated extraordinary bravery and initiative. Emily's eyes narrowed. Thank you, sir. But the files on this drive. She held it up. They contain information on Daggerlight. Evidence of the attack. Someone wanted it destroyed. I need to know it's safe. The colonel's expression didn't change. We have secured all sensitive material. You're in no danger now. Something in his tone didn't sit right. Too polished, too rehearsed. Emily's instincts screamed at her. She remembered the mercenaries, the methodical precision of the attack, the insignia she had seen. She glanced around the room. Every officer's gaze was unnervingly fixed on her. Too fixed. You're lying, she said softly, almost to herself. The colonel's calm eyes flickered, just slightly. Carter, this is your first real engagement. Emotions run high. You've been through trauma. We are ensuring your safety. That is all. Emily shook her head, voice firm. No. I've seen who attacked Dagger. I've seen what they left behind. If you're telling me I'm safe, it means either you're incompetent or you're part of it. The room went silent. Hours later, Emily was escorted to a secure dormitory, officially to rest. She unpacked her gear, every movement deliberate, careful. She knew that once you became a target in a military conspiracy, trust was a dangerous luxury. The sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched across the compound. Emily felt eyes on her. Not soldiers. Not colleagues. But observers. People whose loyalty she could not measure. Her training kicked in. Every habit honed at Dagger, reconnaissance, situational awareness, defensive positioning, came back in sharp focus. She checked her surroundings. Windows locked, doors secure, radios monitored. She plotted every escape route. If they came for her, they would come at night. That night, the first warning arrived. A text alert on her secure military-issued tablet. No sender, no header. Just a message. Stop digging. Leave the drive. Or you won't survive tomorrow. Emily's stomach twisted. The handwriting, or rather the digital imprint, was precise, cold. The same efficiency she had seen in the mercenaries. Someone had been waiting for her, watching, and now they had found a way to communicate. Her hands tightened around the hard drive. Never. She traced her steps from the base of Daggerlight. The files had already been transmitted to a secure satellite node, redundant backups encrypted. Even if someone destroyed the physical copy, Emily still had the evidence in the cloud. But the drive still mattered. It was tangible proof. something that could convince the skeptics in her chain of command. And it was still alive. The next day, Emily's intuition proved correct. While moving through the compound for a routine check, she noticed a shadow detach from the barracks. She froze. The man was dressed as a military contractor, but moved with deliberate stealth, trained, lethal, watching her. She ducked behind a support beam. A second figure emerged, same precision, same movement. They were her hunters now. Emily considered her options. Confrontation meant almost certain death. Fleeing was possible, but the compound was heavily monitored. She needed leverage. Her eyes fell on a ventilation grate. It was small, but it would allow her access to a maintenance tunnel that led to the perimeter. It wasn't much, but it was enough. By nightfall, Emily executed her plan. She waited until her hunters were distracted, using shadows and vents to move silently. Her heart pounded, but she stayed low, every sense alert. When she reached the perimeter, she paused. From the hills, she could see the lights of the nearest town, and a safe place to transmit the Daggerlight files again. A location beyond the reach of those who had tried to erase the truth. Then, a voice from behind her, low, calm, deadly. "Going somewhere, specialist?" Emily froze. Two figures emerged from the darkness, rifles leveled. She gripped her weapon tightly, backing up slowly. "You shouldn't have taken the drive," the first said. "I should have left it?" she asked evenly, her breathing controlled. "So that hundreds of men, women, and civilians could die, and no one would know who did it?" The second mercenary smirked. "We're cleaning up loose ends." "You've been warned." Emily's mind raced. She had seconds to decide. A direct fight was suicidal. A feint might work. She remembered the flare gun in her bag. One shot could create enough chaos to slip past them. Her finger hovered over the trigger. "Don't do it," the first mercenary said, eyes sharp. She smiled faintly. "Watch me." The flare ignited, a piercing red streak into the sky. Smoke erupted around them. The mercenaries cursed, shielding their eyes. Emily bolted, diving into the sand and rolling toward the perimeter fence. Bullets tore through the night behind her, but she didn't look back. She ran until the compound was far behind, until the evidence she carried was the only thing keeping her alive. By dawn, Emily reached the edge of the town. Exhausted, bleeding, and gasping for air, she hid in an abandoned warehouse. The hard drive rested in her lap, the weight of it heavier than any weapon she had carried. Somewhere in the shadows, she swore she heard movement. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She was prepared. She had survived the desert, the fire, the mercenaries, and the betrayal. Now, the hunt had become a war, and Emily Carter was no longer the prey. She was the hunter, and she would make sure that whoever tried to bury the truth at Dagger paid. Emily Carter crouched in the shadows of the abandoned warehouse, the desert town just waking around her. The first light of morning seeped through the cracked walls, glinting off the hard drive she clutched to her chest. She had survived the inferno at Dagger, fought through mercenaries, and uncovered the evidence that had nearly cost her life. But the hardest part lay ahead, exposing the conspiracy without being silenced before she could deliver the proof. She took a deep breath. Every muscle ached, every scar from the past nights throbbed, but her mind was clear. The files on the hard drive contained the truth. Project Daggerlight wasn't just a rogue attack. It was a cover-up, a clandestine operation orchestrated by powerful contractors and officials with blood on their hands. Millions could be implicated. Those responsible had destroyed forward operating base Dagger to erase the evidence, but she had recovered it. She needed allies. Emily reached out to a trusted journalist contact she had met during a previous humanitarian mission. Carla Reyes, known for her fearless reporting on military corruption, agreed to meet in a secure location. Emily arrived, exhausted and disheveled, clutching the hard drive. Carla's eyes widened as Emily laid the evidence before her. "This is explosive," Carla said, scrolling through the files on her secure laptop. "If this goes public, it will shake the military and the contractors to their core." Emily nodded. "It has to. They tried to erase everyone at Dagger. I can't let them get away with it." Carla looked at her seriously. "Emily, you have to be careful. Whoever orchestrated this, the mercenaries, the contractors, they won't stop. They'll come after you." "I know," Emily said. Her voice was steady, determined. "That's why I'm not going back alone." The next step was simple, but dangerous: verifying the authenticity of the files with a secure government oversight agency. Carla arranged a meeting with a whistleblower-friendly officer in a remote safe house. Emily and Louis, now fully recovered from his injuries, approached cautiously. Jenkins had insisted on coming too, though his leg was still weak. Inside the safe house, the officer, a Colonel Hayes, reviewed the files. His face turned pale as he read through evidence of falsified reports, illegal operations, and civilian casualties. This implicates contractors, some high-ranking officials," Hayes said quietly, voice trembling. "If this leaks, there will be an uproar. But it will also put anyone involved in grave danger." Emily leaned forward. "Then help me make sure it goes public safely. The people behind this need to be held accountable, not just hidden behind ranks and contracts." Hayes nodded. "I'll provide encrypted channels and coordinate with oversight committees. But you'll need protection. They will come for you." Emily's jaw tightened. She had faced the desert, fire, and death, and now she would face another battlefield: the corridors of power, the shadow wars where invisible bullets struck first. Over the next few days, Emily coordinated with Carla and Hayes. They prepared an encrypted live transmission that would expose Daggerlight to the public and all the appropriate authorities simultaneously. Every step was calculated. Every communication was secured. Emily slept little, haunted by the images of her fallen comrades, yet fueled by their memory. At night, she trained herself to react instantly. Every sound outside the safe house was treated as potential threat. Every shadow could hide a mercenary or a contractor loyal to the conspiracy. She was prepared to fight again if necessary. Finally, the day of the broadcast arrived. Emily, Carla, Hayes, Louis, and Jenkins huddled around secure terminals. Emily's fingers hovered over the transmission keys. She looked at her team. Each had endured loss and fear alongside her, but each believed in the mission. "This is it," Emily said, voice calm but resolute. "Once this goes out, there's no turning back." "But it has to be done." Carla nodded, hitting the final verification. Ready to expose the truth. Emily took a deep breath and pressed the key. Instantly, the files streamed to secure government channels, journalists' networks, and global media outlets. Daggerlight was no longer a secret. Names, dates, and evidence of the attack on forward operating base Dagger were now public. Across the country and beyond, the fallout began. Within hours, the first response came. Lawmakers demanded investigations. Military officials called emergency meetings. Social media exploded with outrage. Families of soldiers lost at Dagger demanded answers. But Emily knew the real danger wasn't in the public reaction. It was the people who orchestrated Daggerlight. Those who had sent mercenaries into the base and orchestrated the cover-up were now aware that their secret was exposed. She tightened her jacket, scanning the room. "They'll come for us," she said. Louis gave a weary nod. "We can handle them." Emily's eyes hardened. She thought of the flames at Dagger, the screams, the friends she couldn't save. "We've survived worse." That night, as predicted, the first attempt came. 2 black SUVs rolled silently toward the safe house. Mercenaries. Armed, trained, precise. Emily and her team were ready. Gunfire erupted. Emily dove behind cover, returning fire with accuracy born from months of survival in the desert. Sparks flew as bullets struck walls and concrete. Lewis moved alongside her, covering flanks. Jenkins, despite his injured leg, was precise with his aim. Carla, the journalist, was safely protected in the inner room, coordinating backup and transmitting live coverage to authorities in real time. The mercenaries were skilled, but they underestimated Emily. Years of training, combined with the raw experience of surviving the inferno, made her unpredictable, dangerous. Emily moved with tactical precision, covering exits, predicting their movements. One mercenary attempted to flank her, but she anticipated him and disabled him with a well-aimed shot. Another tried to breach the rear door, only to be met by Lewis's counterstrike. Within minutes, the attackers were either incapacitated or retreating, leaving the team victorious but wary. When the smoke cleared, Emily surveyed the room. Her chest heaved, hands still shaking from adrenaline. Around her lay the aftermath of the attempted ambush, but more importantly, they had survived. Carla leaned against a wall, pale but exhilarated. You did it. You survived, and the world knows the truth now. Emily looked at the hard drive, still secure in her bag. The world knows, but that's just the start. There will be investigations, trials, accountability. She paused, thinking of her fallen comrades. Harris, Vega, Delgado. Dagger wasn't just a base. It was a test of humanity. And we passed it by remembering them. Lewis placed a hand on her shoulder. We pass it by staying alive to fight for the rest. And we do it together. Emily nodded. For the first time in weeks, a weight lifted, not entirely because scars ran deep, but she allowed herself a moment of relief. Weeks later, hearings were held. Contractors were exposed, officials implicated, and reforms were demanded. Emily testified, calm and precise, recounting the events at Forward Operating Base Dagger, a firefight, and the mercenaries. Her words carried the weight of truth and experience. The media hailed her bravery. The military recognized her actions. But Emily didn't dwell on accolades. She had learned that heroism was not about medals or recognition. It was about standing for what was right, even when everyone else ran, even when the fire seemed unstoppable. One evening, she stood overlooking a quiet base under the stars, far from Dagger, but carrying its memory. She thought of the friends she had lost and the soldiers she had saved. She knew the scars of Daggerlight would never fully heal, but she also knew she had changed the course of history by refusing to look away. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of hope. The world could be better, and she had a hand in shaping it. Emily Carter had faced chaos, fire, betrayal, and death, and survived. The base had burned. The world had almost forgotten. But she had not. And now, the truth would ignite a storm no one could extinguish.